but the future is somewhat helpful and hopeful with folks like Senator Whitehouse and Sam Farr and this year's policy winner, Ed Markey of Massachusetts. So let me just introduce Senator Whitehouse. He knows the law and the law of the seas. He's a former state attorney general and U.S. attorney in Rhode Island, the ocean state, and a tremendous advocate and one of the most outspoken, perhaps the second most outspoken advocate for the oceans in Rhode Island after Senator Whitehouse. His wife, he's so dedicated to the ocean that he's married an oceanographer. And, or perhaps that's how he became dedicated. But he's certainly a champion, and we're all thrilled. He's introduced the National Endowment for the Ocean, and it's passed its first Senate vote. And this is how we're advocating for national ocean policy. This is how we're going to be able to fund the research and the conservation and the education that's going to be needed to, as I say, to really make this the great maritime and stewardship nation that it has the potential to be. Honored to introduce our Senator from Rhode Island and Senator from America's Seas, Sheldon Whitehouse.
Thank you, David, and thank you all for being here to lend your hearts and your hands to this cause. It is a pleasure to be here, but anytime we talk about the situation of the oceans, it's also a bit somber because the warnings that are coming in from what we're doing through climate change, through pollution, through energy extraction, are pretty serious, and they come from all quadrants. You can go to the far north or very far south to our Arctic seas, and you see Arctic ice melting. Indeed, last summer, sea ice extent in the Arctic Ocean hit a record low. You can go into the tropical waters, and you see live coral coverage on Caribbean reefs plummeting from nearly 50% in the 1970s to less than 10% today. You can go to the top of the food chain and find marine mammals so laden with PCBs, flame retardants, mercury, and other bioaccumulative pollutants that they are swimming toxic waste. Living, swimming, toxic waste. And you can go to the bottom of the food chain and you see the population of phytoplankton, some of our very smallest ocean inhabitants, down 40% over the last century. You can go far away from where I am to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is growing, swirling about the northern Pacific Ocean. Or for me, you can stay very close to home in Narragansett Bay, which is now 4 degrees warmer in the winter than it was 30 years ago. Quick side story on that, since Sandra was mentioned, I am indeed married to a true ocean advocate. I just play one on TV like Marcus Welby. But when I was trying to prove myself to Sandra before we were married, she invited me to come out sampling with her in Narragansett Bay. And the species that she was tracking was called the winter flounder. Well, guess when we dive when you're pursuing a species called the winter flounder. I thought it was pretty horrifically cold, but I guess I did prove my mettle because things worked out. So maybe it's not a completely unvarnished ill that Narragansett Bay is now 4 degrees warmer in the winter. But don't tell that to the winter flounder, because they've basically gone. They are down 90% from the big winter fishing catch that they used to be. I used to drive over the Newport Bridge and the Jamestown Bridge and look down and see the trawlers working in the winter. You don't see that any longer. There has been a massive population crash, partly because, although 4 degrees doesn't sound like a lot to us, it's a signal to a winter flounder, this isn't home. Head for cooler waters, and they have. And they also have an interesting life cycle relationship with a little shrimp called Crangon septem spinosa, which comes in with the warmer water and eats the larval winter flounder. Well, they're coming in sooner now, so they're able to eat more larval winter flounder. What happened is that the shrimp ate buckets of the little larval winter flounder, but the ones they missed grew big enough that the little shrimp couldn't eat them any longer. And then, payback's a bitch, they turned around and they fed on the sand shrimp. Now, they don't have that chance to turn about so much because they're getting more clobbered, because there's more time when they're small enough to eat when they're prey to the shrimp. So, long story about that, but for all of this, the one thing that is the overarching concern that we have, I think, the dominant global concern and the most threatening challenge is ocean acidification. Our oceans have absorbed more than 550 billion tons of carbon pollution, and as a result, they've become 30% more acidic. The rate of acidity is increasing at the fastest we've measured in millions and millions of years, and we're headed for a 160% increase in acidity by the end of the century, which even now makes life a lot harder for oysters and crabs and lobsters and corals and, yes, the plankton that comprise the very base of the food web. At 160%, we don't know what happens. That's an epic experiment with our world ecosystem. Ocean temperatures are also changing dramatically. Sea surface temperatures in 2012 from the Gulf of Maine to Cape Hatteras were the highest recorded in 150 years. And like my winter flounder, that means that fish stocks shifted northward, and some are disappearing from U.S. waters as they move further offshore. Temperatures rise, water expands in volume. That's pretty basic science. And also fresh water pours in out of the Arctic snowpack and off of the ice sheets. The result is that tide gauges in my home state, in the harbor in Newport, Rhode Island, for instance, show an increase in average sea level of nearly 10 inches since 1930. And those measurements show that the rate of increase is itself increasing, consistent with the rate predicted by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Yes, deniers, they were right again. We will continue to take advantage of the ocean's bounty, as we should. We will trade, we will fish, and we will sail. We will dispose of waste, we will extract fuel, and we will harness the wind. We will work our working oceans. Navies and cruise ships, sailboats and supertankers will plow their surface. We cannot undo that part of our relationship with the sea. What we can do is change what we do in return. We can become, for the first time, not just takers, but caretakers. We are beginning to take some baby steps. As David mentioned, the Senate voted 67 to 32 to authorize a national endowment for the oceans, coasts, and Great Lakes. This vote amended the Water Resources Development Act, which is pending on the Senate floor now. If we can survive the hurdles ahead, get where to pass, get through conference, and get it funded, 3 significant hurdles, this establishes the endowment as a funding stream for research, restoration, and protection of our marine and coastal resources. Bob Ballard has described as, I quote, a major problem, the disconnect between the importance of oceans and the meager funds we as a nation invest to not only understand their complexity but become responsible stewards of the bounty they represent. This endowment, if we can get it over these last hurdles, will help us become responsible stewards of that bounty. I've also brought a bipartisan group of senators together to form a Senate Oceans Caucus to increase awareness and find common ground in responding to oceans and coastal issues. Last Congress, with Senators Boxer Cardin and then Senator Kerry, I co-founded a group in the Senate called the Tuesday 12, because that's when we meet, to help focus attention on climate change. And this Congress, with Congressman Waxman, I founded a bicameral task force on climate change to coordinate the work of the 2 houses, to focus congressional and public attention, and to develop bills and plans for executive action. So some things are going on, but the real battle is going to be on carbon pollution. And here I want to close my remarks with a message of hope. I want to push back against the idea that so many seem to have accepted that we can't do anything serious on carbon pollution. In fact, we can, and the tools to do so are lying right around us for us to pick up and get to work. Here's my case, very simply put. Pricing carbon properly is necessary. We have to make the big carbon polluters pay a fee that includes the costs that they impose on society. That's Market 101. At present, political conditions do not allow us to price carbon, so we must change the present political conditions. Changing the political conditions will require 3 actions, all of which, and each of which, we are capable of. 1, there must be a regulatory threat to the carbon polluters. 2, there must be a political threat to the climate deniers. And 3, there has to be a gathering of the armies on our side. Let me go through the steps. First, let's face it, the polluters and their allies control Congress. That means we have to rely on the executive branch for regulatory action. Very strong regulatory action. Regulatory action that will change the equation for the polluters. The status quo is a win for the polluters. They get to pollute for free. Change that, big time, and it won't take them long to come to Congress. Because regulatory action puts all the costs directly on the polluters. There are no revenues to offset any of that. Whereas a carbon pollution fee creates revenues that could help offset their costs. If that's their choice, it becomes in their interest to strike a deal in Congress. But you have to have very strong regulatory action, and that will require an awakening at the White House. Second, to create a meaningful political threat, we need a super PAC. I'm sorry, I hate them too, but we do. We need one with tens of millions of dollars and focused entirely on climate and oceans. I am sick of our side bringing not even a knife, but a feather to a gunfight. It's no wonder we lose. But when deniers in Congress see that kind of money coming on the field against them, and don't just see that money coming on the field on their side, many will rethink. Last is gathering the armies. There is astonishingly wide support for action on climate. Environmental groups, obviously. The green energy and investment industry. Our national security officials can be put into the line of fire on this. Property casualty insurers and reinsurers. Young people, like the college movement for coal divestment. Faith groups. Celebrities. Hunting, fishing, outdoor, and conservation groups. Affinity retailers like Apple, Coca-Cola, and Nike. Walmart. Labor groups. Mayors and local officials. Perhaps even the Internet Wave group. And of course, the public is with them and with us. Polls show that. But the problem is that most of this support is out there, but it is latent. And it is unorganized. None of these groups feel they can carry the battle on their own, so they sit. Create allied command. Assemble these various divisions. Let them join in on a strategy that deploys them all effectively into action. That's a game changer. So, when the polluting industry is looking down the barrel of a regulatory gun, when their political allies are fearful of a well-funded super PAC dedicated to their demise, when mobilized and motivated forces from a wide sector of the economy are active and coordinated, that's when the political landscape shifts dramatically and a price on carbon is achievable. So let us be not faint of heart. This can all take place quite rapidly. All of these tools are available to us now. We just need to do it. As someone once said, yes, we can. Thank you.